Welcome to Winchester Now. I'm Mary Blacksland. On today's programme, a special delivery to a local post office. Teachers march in Winchester over pay. We step back to Hampshire 100 years ago. And good news for Winchester's Talking Newspaper.
Winchester Radio.
A community near Winchester has delivered letters of thanks to the owners of their local post office who are retiring after 24 years. A presentation was made to BK and Sangeeta Kaura from Kingsworthy on their final day. The post office, which has been situated on the London Road for 50 years, is now closed unless a new buyer comes forward. A show of appreciation to BK and Sangeeta Kaura, who have run the post office on London Road in Kingsworthy for 24 years. They were given a postbag of letters, but this time each one was addressed to them. Thank yous from the village and further afield for all their work. A gift was also given to BK and Sangeeta, organised by local resident Liz Kavanagh.
It's just been overwhelming, to be honest. I put up a Just Giving, and I think the intention was perhaps to raise a couple of £100, and suddenly we're up in the 1,000, and people have just wanted to give, and we're also giving a mail bag of thank you cards to the shop today, and you should just see them. I've almost got a bag full. I think people have been really touched by this whole thing about the couple moving, and they've given so much to the local community. Everyone wants to say thank you.
Have you read any of the cards? What are people saying? How much do the BK and Sangeeta mean to people?
So I haven't read the cards because that would be a bit naughty, but I have read all the comments that have been left on Just Giving, and there's been loads and loads of them. So things like people who remember Sangeeta and BK giving their children sweets when they were very little, people who remember them going the extra mile to get something in, people who remember them smiling very, very early in the morning when perhaps the rest of us are feeling a bit groggy. A thing that came across a lot was that they both never have a bad word to say about anyone. They know everybody in this community really well, but I've only heard positive things.
And they'll be really missed, won't they?
Oh, they certainly will, yeah, definitely. This patch of Kingsworthy won't be the same without them.
What's your reaction to what's happened today, this reception, the gifts, the cards? What do you make of this?
Really touched. It's such a nice gesture, honestly. We really didn't expect all this, but it is so nice. It really is exciting, yes.
Yeah, I feel like being honoured in the community for all the work we did over the years.
That's really 24 years. How are you feeling your last day today?
Yeah, that's it, 24 years this year. And last day, it doesn't feel like a last day, but
it doesn't feel like we've done 24 years here.
Yeah, mixed feelings, I must say that.
On 7 days a week, it doesn't feel like it.
No, it's really nice. I think
but people have been nice, the community has been nice, and
we're really touched.
People have appreciated us, and we do appreciate the customers and people in the community and in Kingsworthy and nearby villages.
It's also a sad day as the Kingsworthy Post Office has been operating on the site for 50 years. Many people will have seen it en route into the city. No buyer has come forward as yet.
Hi, I'm Jane Rutter, City Councillor and Past Mayor of Winchester.
And what are your feelings today as this post office closes after so long?
It's tragic that we haven't been able to find anybody to take over the post office role yet, but I know the post office are looking for somebody, but it is tragic for the community. But we are incredibly lucky in Kingsworthy that we have another post office up at Springvale Stores, so I hope people will go in and support that local shop as well. But I want to say a huge thank you to BK and to Sangeeta for the years of great community service that they've given to us, and I know that they've put off their well-earned retirement for a long time, hoping that somebody could come forward to take over the post office in their stead.
And they've been such a big part of the community for so long, like you say, and it's lovely that people have rallied round and made donations and cards and things like that.
Absolutely. I think what Liz has done in the fundraising side to help with them with their retirement is really heartwarming, and it's so lovely that so many people, and I'm amongst them, I've had my papers delivered from here for years. You know, we really will miss them and the wonderful community service that they've given. They've been such a huge part of the local area for so long.
You're going to miss it, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to miss it. We're going to miss people. We are going to go through this adjustment phase where we're going to miss people, seeing people every day.
But lots of new adventures to come.
That's it.
Yes.
Sangeeta and BK are looking forward to their first holiday in a long time and a lie-in after 24 years of early morning paper duties. A tea party is also being held in their honour in nearby Easton in a few weeks' time. A community showing how much they'll be missed. A protest has been held in Winchester as teachers' unions went on strike in a row over pay.
No whips, no buts.
No education cuts!
More than 100 teachers and supporters from across Hampshire marched from the West Gate to the Broadway, where a rally was held. A number of schools around the city were forced to close and classes in others didn't run. It coincided with strikes on the railways, universities and the civil service. I spoke to Karen Williams from the National Education Union.
We're striking for our pay, but also about funding for schools and making education sustainable in the future.
A lot of schools are closed today and children have already been disrupted with their education because of the pandemic. Do you feel guilty that they're being disrupted again?
We don't want to strike, let me make that really clear. Everybody here would rather be in the classroom. We've tried everything to persuade the government of how bad things are in education and they won't listen. Education is disrupted on a daily basis by low funding in schools, by posts not being filled, so vacancies, because teaching is no longer an attractive profession.
And what would you say to parents who've had to take a day off today to look after their children, some perhaps who can't afford to do that?
We're sorry about that, but we don't feel guilty about this. The government could come and negotiate. They knew in October we were balloting for strike action. They've known for several weeks that we had the mandate to strike. They could have come and negotiated. They haven't, so unfortunately this is the first of 4 days of strike action. They've got about 26 days to come to the table now to stop the next round of action. So let's see if they do.
We just heard some cars beeping there. What do you think the public think of the strike action? What have they been saying to you?
They have been very, very supportive. On the picket lines, we've had lots and lots of waves and hoots. Parents have been writing to schools to say how they support teachers taking action because they know how hard teachers work and they know the difficulties in school with recruitment and retention, and they want that to stop.
We've got strikes on the railway, strikes in the health service. What makes you think yours will be different and yours will be successful?
I think it's a very important strike. The education sector brings up the children of the future. We've got to stand up for them, and the government have got to open their eyes and see what is happening and fund education properly.
Meanwhile, the government has said they're increasing the starting salaries for teachers and investing an extra £2 billion into schools. But more strikes are planned in March. Council tax in Hampshire is set to rise by 4.99%, the maximum increase allowed, meaning a £69 increase for a Band D property. The County Council blames a £58 million budget shortfall for the next financial year and says the government funding isn't enough to cover the growing pressures of social care. Now other news from around the city, here's Paul.
Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has paid tribute to a friend and former flatmate at his funeral in Winchester. Matthew Leeming from Aldsford was an explorer, writer and expert on Afghanistan. He died in November, aged 58. He lived with Mr Johnson at Oxford University and they remained friends. Mr Leeming also did work with the homeless and was a Winchester street pastor. His funeral was held at St Peter's in Jewry Street. Winchester MP Steve Bryan has contacted Hampshire Police to ask for an urgent update on a spate of window smashing in the city centre. A number of shops have had their windows damaged. The MP said he's talked to businesses who are increasingly worried about the incidents. He says he wants confirmation that CCTV will be used to press for the most robust penalties available. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 businesses in Winchester expect cash flow problems in 2023, according to a survey by Winchester Bid. But the figure is better than that recorded 3 years ago during the pandemic. It's based upon findings from 76 local firms. It also found that most businesses were satisfied with their results in 2022, taking into account the economic challenges. The hospitality industry saw a 15% increase in footfall on 2021. And Play to the Crowd, the charity which runs the Theatre Royal, has been awarded £25,000 towards their work to deliver the Hat Fair this year. The event was put under threat after losing Vital Arts Council funding. Hampshire County Council has given the grant, which will enable the Carnival Parade to take place, involving hundreds of Hampshire school children and community groups. For Winchester Radio, I'm Paul Blitz.
Winchester Radio.
Some football news now, and it was the 5th time of trying for Winchester City's match against Bashley in the 3rd round of the Hampshire Senior Cup. It finally went ahead after weather and ground conditions had previously forced the cancellation of the match. But it wasn't the result Winchester wanted, losing 4-3 and going out of the competition. Now, if you're interested in delving into the past, then this story will be of interest to you. The 1921 census is now available to view for free at all Hampshire libraries and the Hampshire Record Office in Winchester. Earlier I spoke to Hampshire County Councillor Russell Oppenheimer.
It's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to find out a bit more about their family or their local area. And it's super easy to go and access the census. You can do it at any library or go to the Records Office itself. And there's a web page there where you can go and look up whatever you want to.
And can you tell us a bit about what we learn about the county and what life was like at that time?
It was a time immediately after the First World War when populations had suffered terribly from the number of deaths during the war, but also from the Spanish influenza that had happened just then. And, we've just come out of COVID and we're seeing something similar with excess deaths now. But in 1921, it's really noticeable. We also get a sense of some of the famous people. So some of the highlights for us were looking at Alice Hargreaves, who was the inspiration for Alice in Wonderland, who was living in Lyndhurst at the time, age 69. Another interesting example, an explorer who went to the Antarctic with Sir Ernest Shackleton. His name was George Marston. He was a school teacher at Bedales in 1921. A key reason that life was so different back in 1921 is, of course, that most women didn't have the vote at that time. It wasn't until a few years later that the Parliament legislated to give all women the vote. So that's another interesting detail from that period.
And there's another reason why this 1921 census is important, isn't there?
Yeah, well, that's right. What's interesting is that the 1931 census details were destroyed completely during the Blitz. And then in 1941, there wasn't a census because of the war. So actually, the information we have here in the 1921 census is the last information we're going to get until the 1951 census becomes available in 2051. So it's a really interesting opportunity. It's a snapshot of what life was like 100 years ago. And there can be some surprises there. People might want to go and look at who was living in their house in 1921, and they might be surprised by who it was and how many people there were. And, sometimes if you're researching a family member, you can find out some, unexpected things about what was happening in 1921. Certainly something I've been doing recently in looking at my own genealogy. I mean, the fact that there is this interest now is partly what's leading to this resurgence in information. And we're really grateful to Find My Past, which is a website that they've actually, helped us to prepare the information through a digitization project. And that's why this information is now available through the website that, as I say, can be accessed at any Hampshire library.
There's good news for the Winchester Talking Newspaper, who've got a new home. They're moving into studios in the office of the Hampshire Chronicle in Upper Brook Street. For 30 years, volunteers have been providing recordings of the paper for blind and visually impaired listeners. Anna has been talking to their chairman, John Richards.
Well, we're very lucky because we're in offices above the Hampshire Chronicle. So downstairs they create and write the news, and upstairs we record it and send out our recordings to our blind and visually impaired listeners. It couldn't be a better match. It's perfect.
And you're part of a whole network of talking newspapers, and you cover this area, keeping people who are blind or partially sighted connected with what's going on in the world.
Yes, that's true. There are 200 talking newspapers in the UK, and we all have our own patches. So obviously our patch is Winchester and surrounding areas, but there's a Rumsey Advertiser, an Andover Advertiser, and they all have their own talking newspapers to serve their blind and visually impaired listeners, which is marvellous because many of them feel very cut off from society and don't know what's going on. Through us, they do.
And how long have you been providing this service at the Winchester Talking Newspaper?
Well, we started 30 years ago, and we haven't missed one single week since, apart from when we had the absolute lockdown in the COVID time, and we didn't record or send things out for 5 weeks, but that was all. Other than that, we have every Friday we've recorded and sent things out.
So many wonderful local charities here in Winchester, entirely run by volunteers, including yourselves. And so for our listeners, tell us a little bit about the different volunteer roles.
Yes, there are many, because we have editors who take all they get hold of the Hampshire Chronicle and they decide which of the articles we are going to record on a Friday morning, and then they stick those onto bits of cardboard, and that stops it rustling because the microphone's very sensitive. We have a presenter for each programme. We have 3 readers round the table who read. We have people who do the copying and take everything to the post office so that it can be posted and delivered the following morning. We have people called ratters. No time to go into what it is, why it's called ratters, but when the memory sticks come back, they clean them and get them ready for the next recording. We have outreach people who go out and talk to the visually impaired listeners and show them how to use our playing boxes. So there are plenty of roles, and currently we have about 70 volunteers.
And also, like everything in the world, you've moved with technology, because you mentioned about the digital memory sticks. I can remember the days when you had tapes.
Oh gosh, the days of tapes, a nightmare. Because what we always say to our listeners on the recording is, don't forget, if you want to listen to a story again, you just have to go back to it or move forward if you want to move on. Well, that's easy with the digital memory sticks. Because with the boxes we give them, you just press the forward button to go forward and the back button to go back. But in the days of tapes, they used to have to try and reverse it and go, it used to go, and then they'd stop and see if it was the right place, and it never was. So we've moved on a lot since then.
And if you've sparked people's interest, maybe if they or a loved one have got some time to give as a volunteer, or they know somebody in the family or in their neighbourhood who would really appreciate receiving a copy of the Winchester Talking News, how can they get in touch?
2 main ways. One way is to phone, and I'll give you the number now, 023 8073 2888. That's 023 8073 2888. That's the telephone number that'll come straight through. Or look on to our website, www.winchestertalkingnews.com, and if you look onto there, it'll give you an address where you can send an email to us. So those are the two main ways, and we'll be back to you as soon as we can.
And we finish today with our shout-outs, our tribute to people who give above and beyond to help our community. Here's Nigel.
Our first shout-out today is to the 650 runners who donned their Santa suits and braved cold weather to take part in the Santa Fun Runs and raise money for Naomi House and Jack's Place. The donations have now been totted up, and a total of £37,000 was raised at the events in Winchester and Salisbury to support the vital work of these hospices. A charity that supports voluntary and community groups in Winchester is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Community First offers training, information and guidance, as well as encouraging volunteering and promoting well-being. Over 100 individuals representing over 60 organisations attended the charity's AGM, which was held in Winchester last Friday. Here's Trevor Lewis, Vice Chair of Community First, to tell us more.
Every district in Hampshire had a council for voluntary service, and the original brief was that we help charities to form, help them find volunteers, trustees, money, train the staff. But what progressively happened was that the local authorities delivered services that they no longer wanted to deliver. So they asked the CVSs to deliver them. So we became involved in dial-a-ride transport, community transport, shop mobility, and we built up a service side as well as supporting members. With the ageing population, so many more people now are becoming housebound, and being able to pick up a telephone and book a ride from a safe source, which is really important, is incredibly convenient. I mean, I've spoken to people getting off those buses, asking them how they find the experience, and they say, it's my lifeline. Without it, I really don't know what I'd do.
Thanks have been given to the thousands of people who took part in the RSPB's Big Garden Bird Watch last weekend. People were asked to watch the birds in the garden, balcony or local park for an hour and register the species they saw. The data is used to help the organisation's conservation work. And staying with birds, and good news for Marwell Zoo with the return of 7 Humboldt penguins who were forced to isolate after an outbreak of avian flu at the end of last year. The zoo says this has only been possible thanks to the excellent planning, quick response and hard work of their veterinary and animal teams. The birds all tested negative, and after extensive work to clean and disinfect their enclosure, they were allowed home.
Winchester Radio.
And don't forget you can send us your shout-outs or any news stories to news@winchester.radio. Thanks for listening and goodbye till next week.